I think we were aiming for graduation next week, something like that. So if you can review it, that would be fantastic.
Great. Yeah, I put a comment on it this morning. I think it's the first issue on the agenda. And we are live now, so welcome everyone. And thanks everybody for joining. I know the time is a little tough for some of us, but yeah. So, and also I may be a little slow because I just woke up. Everybody add yourselves to the minutes, which I can add to the chat again. Do we have any announcements? Let me let Sarah in. Any announcements at all this week? I mean, the one that we have is that the election is open, but I think maybe there's an issue for that, so we'll get to that. All right, let me double check. Yep. Anything else? Anything going on this week? Is the board meeting public session later this week? Yeah, right. Is that happening on Friday?
We have a board meeting on Friday. We also have a marketing meeting later today. Is that right, Rachel?
We have a meeting today at noon Pacific, and that's 3 p.m. Eastern. That is on the calendar.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, so in terms of the board, the vote that we sent just recently was approved, and I landed that PR. I guess in terms of the collaboration network, there's some discussion about the suggestion of a default license. It's probably going to hold that up a bit, but I think those are the two things that were on the take to the board list.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Michael, and others. Cool. All right, let's get into the agenda. The first item is the Fastify charter review. This is issue 617. There are some links that Matteo has in the description to see the onboarding checklist and the Fastify charter. Emily pointed out a couple of questions about making decisions, but otherwise it's a short charter. It can be easily reviewed. Folks could take a look at it and add their thoughts. That'd be great. Like Matteo said, they're hoping to wrap this up soon. Anything more to add here from anyone? Matteo, Emily, anybody? No? Cool. Next up is the nominations have been closed for the community board seat for the OpenJS Foundation Board of Directors. This is issue 616. Jory has a great description here with lots of details. We have a few people who, excuse me, who self-nominated, James Snell, Michael Dawson, Dylan Scheiman. I don't know if I've ever said your last name, Dylan. Is that how you say it?
Schiemann. Yeah, it's close enough. Yep.
Is German you say the second vowel, Schiemann? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And Toby and Sarah. And so that's closed, and the election email from OpaVote went out yesterday, and that goes to voting members as we had decided, and so that is in process. So that's great.
For regular members on that one, I sent you an email in case you hadn't noticed last night about if you have thoughts on that, about getting in touch.
I haven't seen that email, but it's early for me.
You're not a regular member, so you didn't get that one.
Oh, okay. So I think the decision was that it would be voting members who would vote. Partially the okay. So was that a question, or sorry if I misunderstood?
It was a statement. I was just, I am, along with Michael, one of the two, we are the two voting representatives of the regular members. Therefore, the email of which I wanted to mention to said regular members about their ability to have possibly a say if they have strong opinions or any
Got
opinions
it.
about the matter.
Got it. So is that you requesting feedback from folks for your vote? Is that what you're saying?
Effectively, yes.
Great, fantastic. All right, well, thank you.
Can I just say, wow, amazing group of candidates. And I wish we could do a bylaw change and add 5 new board
Yeah.
seats. Seriously. So thanks everyone for throwing their hat in. Super cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, it's great to see a good number of candidates running. So
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, that's going. Anything else on that we want to talk about or anything? No? Cool. Next steps for supporter program, issue 607 is up next. Sarah led a meeting last week that I think went well. So Sarah, do you want to give us an update here?
Yeah, we had a meeting last Friday. I'm compiling our notes into a pull request, some exciting suggestions, just moving things forward and adding some more details. So stay tuned sometime this week.
Great. There were some exciting things in that call.
The more I think about it, the more I get excited. So that's good.
Great. So we'll look for an update later this week or talk about it more next week or something.
Yeah.
Excellent. Great. Cool. Any questions or anything? Anybody talk about it? I mean, I guess we'll talk about it when the PR lands, or everybody's good? Cool. Next up is develop annual review process for projects. Emily opened this up mid-July. We've had some conversation here. Was it that Toby and Chris were going to, I think, take the lead on drafting some stuff around non-impact projects? I can't remember where. I'm trying to catch up on the.
I think it got left as an action on Toby to reach out to interested parties about getting that in a small group forwards.
Great.
I thought maybe Chris Hiller was installed in.
I think they're both working
right?
on it. Yeah, I think so. Chris's last comment says he's going to split this into multiple issues, but I think I even saw in Slack Chris asking Toby, how they're going to split it up. So I think they're both working on it. So we will catch up with them soon. I'm excited about this. So hopefully we, we make some progress here, have a meeting, whatever we need to do, and start to have this take shape. I think the whole 360 review thing would be really healthy. So I look forward to that. Anything else we want to talk about on that one? We're really blowing through this agenda, which is pretty great. Next up is doc governance change for collaboration network. Did I see, Michael, you started to type something there?
Yeah, there's some discussion. So the last thing was around, like when we took it to the board in the first place, the suggestion was that we ask the Foundation legal and get a suggested default license, which Brian did, but it seems like there's some disagreement of whether that makes sense or not. They recommended Apache 2. And I guess there's some suggestions the default for most open source projects today is MIT. So that discussion
for
is
JavaScript.
continuing. Right.
So at least my view on that is that I think it's perfectly fine for us to have a different default than is the default for JavaScript in general. But then we have to actually say why that is the case. We can't just say the default is this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so if you think with a little more explanation, it might be reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, I've got nothing against Apache 2, and the patent grants that it does have explicitly included are kind of a good idea in many cases.
Right. Anybody else here have thoughts one way or the other?
I mean, I added my commentary to the ticket, which is sort of my perspective on why people choose MIT over BSD or Apache. Mostly it's people don't like to read and it's longer. I'm serious. Like, it used to be like you had to embed the copyright notice at the top of every file, and the Apache one was like 2 pages of text, and the MIT was like a paragraph, and so you could fit it at the top of a file more easily.
Tierney, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I guess I have not haven't had time this last week to see this. I will take a look at this, but my initial guess is that I would, if we're suggesting Apache, I would recommend MIT, just because that is what literally the majority of the ecosystem has done, and I think it's strange for us to break the pattern that the ecosystem we exist in and like is our namesake has taken.
I don't think that MIT is generally used more than Apache to is sufficient reason. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't disagree. It is. It absolutely is. Most of the stuff I do MIT or ISC, which is effectively the same. But if there's actual good reason for us to recommend Apache 2, then I think it's entirely valid for us as a foundation because the projects within the foundation are legally in a different position than many other projects are, to recommend a different default. But then we have to explain why this is a better default in this particular case, even if it doesn't apply for the general case.
Yeah, I think, well, so I mean, I think that a lot of the goal though with our foundation is like we want to be a neutral home for JavaScript, which then kind of pushes toward, well, like large projects that are owned by corporations would generally end up like, I think our goal as a foundation is to get them into our project or our foundation, and I mean those are all licensed MIT. I guess it's just like it's then creating a rift between new projects coming in versus.
Well, we're not changing anything to do with the only thing that we're adding the text for was for the collaboration network.
Okay.
So it's not adding any more guidance to like the IP policy or anything like that.
Right.
It's simply saying for the collaboration network where, you know, if we're going to start from fresh in many cases, you know, if there isn't a preference for some other license, this is the one that I guess from the legal perspective is the strongest.
Okay. And is that legal perspective documented in there? Because I'm looking at it and don't really see it, but maybe I'm off.
I think that's potentially Emily's point, that it should explain why that one is a better choice.
Yeah. Okay. And in general, Apache is preferred for things where you have different companies collaborating because it does spell out patent issues. And there are companies that kind of default to it. So like, I know like Microsoft defaults to it when they open source things like TypeScript or Babylon or other things like that. And Google has expressed a preference for it for stuff they contribute to. So I think like when you're looking at a license for, hey, we're creating a collaboration group with a bunch of different people coming together, it's nice to have that spelled out, but I don't think it's a strong enough reason. Like we're not saying, hey, every project that joins the foundation should be, you know, Apache or whatever.
No.
So I guess in that case, like, is our current system of a CLA or DCO not enough for that?
Talking about different things there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, I think like it was simply that the existing wording was, you know, you can choose one based on the IP policy. The suggestion just was like, there is a preference for this, and as Emily says, like when, you know, companies, especially if they come together to collaborate on things, Apache is, and from our legal advice, Apache is the one that would be preferred, but it doesn't say you can't use anything else either.
Yeah, I guess like having briefly read the PRs where we've been talking about it, I guess I don't feel like it's substantiated enough to do that. So I guess adding that substantiation it would be needed to sufficiently comment on it.
As I've understood the situation, fundamentally using Apache makes it significantly more difficult for any of the participants in any of the code around a project that where it depends on the license to be able to weaponize any of the IP that they might own that is somehow associated with that project, or that could be weaponized to hinder later developments or changes.
Actually, the Apache license prevents that. Is that what you're saying?
The patent grants there, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I pasted it in the chat. Basically, it's that clause that gives a patent, or covers patents, whereas MIT just punts on patents completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Which I guess makes sense when we're talking about collaboration spaces.
Yeah,
that sort of protection.
But I would argue that if this preference, because we're saying at the moment that any of these four are fine, if we're saying in one place that this one is preferred, I think it's a weirdly specific place to say where it's preferred. I would argue that if we do have a reason to prefer Apache 2, I would be surprised if the scope of that preference would really only extend to the collaboration network. And therefore, it might make sense to actually include this preference in the IPR policy document, where we basically state the case that if you are deciding between these and you have no other reasons to pick one, pick Apache 2 because these reasons, or something like that.
So you're suggesting if we do it here in the collaboration network that we should extend that throughout the foundation as a recommendation?
I'm saying if it makes sense for the collaboration network, why doesn't it make sense for the foundation in general? For new stuff.
Okay, well that's a bigger can of worms, I guess.
that would be the reason, maybe, is that do we want to get into the, like in this case, if it's more likely to be new, I think, new content versus, like, it's certainly not projects bringing their existing project in, which already probably has its own licenses.
And for that, I think we already make it clear that if you are using one of these four licenses, then everything's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, well, should we get some of this thought documented in the issue or PR, and then we can have just discuss it further later, or what do we want to do?
So I guess
I can take a run at that. Sure.
Sounds good.
Great.
Just adding, I think the trick here is just to add just enough so that it provides some context without getting too prescriptive, so that we don't get into the point where we say, well, you can choose any, but here's like 11 reasons why you should choose one over the other. We'll try and avoid that. So I'll try to keep it terse, and if it ends up continues to be too terse, then we can certainly add more around it.
And to be clear, we're not making a decision. We're describing why we would potentially make this decision, and then we'll make the decision.
I think where Brian's going to update his PR to add the explanation that people have expressed as missing, in terms of like why that recommendation.
Got it. And
if we can get consensus and it can land, then we can move forward. Otherwise, we'll continue to figure out how to move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, and Michael, I'm thinking also a reassurance that this is truly if you don't have any other preference, right? This is meant to be a fallback, so you're not choosing at random.
Okay.
Right. We want to avoid well, I chose this because I didn't know, and it's like, and it would have been, oh, well, yeah, I would have done that if I'd known, right? That you had a preference.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that does not prevent anyone from choosing something else, just merely the default fallback.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Moving on. Where the heck were we? Was that all around the governance changes for Collaboration Network? Is that what we were talking about? Because next up is the foundation-wide copyright guidance, which is pull request 414, which I think we translated into pull request 618, which is Toby's stab at, I think, did he call it a simpler taking the comments from that pull request and pulling it into a new PR. Toby's not on the call, but I think, Brian, you've got a lot of comments in here. Do you want to kind of, would you be able to give people an update on this at all, or no?
Sure, yeah. So I had written the first one, and then Toby had crunched it down a bit to make it a bit more consumable. There are a couple of places where we are still trying to figure out what the what the right level of guidance would be. One of those areas is around adopting the DCO versus a CLA for inbound code. And basically at this point, I think we have it to the point where it's about as minimal as we would want it. It seems that there are some other things which do need to get broken out into some more general guidance. And one of those items would be effectively, if your project wants to use the DCO, what do you actually need to do in order to do it? We have fairly concise guidance on how to adopt the CLA, which is basically somebody reaches out to me. We get the, assuming that they're using one of the pre-approved CLA texts, we get them loaded into the tool, and then that's it. DCO is very simple to adopt. It's meant to be a very lightweight process, but I guess from various discussions, it sounds like maybe there's not a high level of comfort with what exactly is required. And that's something that we can definitely fix. And that's pretty much where that is right now.
Great. There are comments on the issue here, but I encourage folks to take a look if you haven't. Does anybody have any comments or questions here in the meeting?
Sorry for my background noise. So the discussion about changing overall the CLA text to an entirely different one, that's a separate issue from this?
Separate issue from this, yep.
But not one that is on the agenda?
Did we ever get that on the agenda? I think we removed that from the agenda, didn't we? A few weeks ago, or
yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah. Emily, would you like to discuss that one?
Sure. I mean, at least in my case, it's hard for message format, which we're still using the JS Foundation CLA to switch now to something which we might end up needing to switch to something else very soon afterwards. So it's all a little bit tied together, because it's hard for me as a maintainer to know what the eventual steady state will be and when that will be reached. It would be nice to be there already.
So
yeah, I gotcha.
Let me just interject real quickly, Brian. This is the updating the CLA to the Apache style ICLA and CCLA conversation.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I dropped the issue into the chat if anybody wants to catch up on that.
Yeah, so Emilia, on this one, I'd recommend let's not change over anything right now until everything goes through on switching over to the Apache style templates. One of the reasons for switching to that is that it's obviously much more common in the industry than the bespoke license or the bespoke CLA that we've been using for JSF and OpenJS. I would definitely not at this point recommend that anybody go to the current one that we have, simply because of the reasons that you mentioned there. I mean, switching to Apache is the best move long term, and it's most likely to be stable. So I'd say maybe put that on ice just for a little bit longer.
Can we get a definition of a little bit longer? Because overall, this issue seems to be one that's now been going on for like a year and a half.
Yeah, so I mean, it was stabilized for about a year until we decided to take a look at the at switching over from the custom one to the Apache one. So I really I think I need to go back and see where we are in terms of getting feedback. But really, the board deferred voting on it until they'd heard kind of all the different perspectives here, including from the CPC. If the CPC is generally ready to say to the board, yeah, we're good with this Apache style text. This seems workable, or maybe it seems more workable than the previous text. Then that would be very helpful feedback as well. Once we have that vote, though, all we have to do is turn it on.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think Jory had sent requests for feedback to the projects, and I'm just not 100% sure it was this topic, but I'm thinking it might have been.
Yeah,
I think you're right, Michael.
And I thought we'd gotten the, from Jory, we maybe want to just double check with Jory, but I thought we'd gotten the all clear that, there were no objections or concerns raised. I think the separate issue of, do you need to offer both a corporate CLA and individual CLA? That's the discussion that was continuing, and we met with Toby, Chris, and I did the other day to better understand, and we can sort of discuss that in the upcoming board meeting. But that's a separate issue, I believe.
And my only concern continues to be that I think for someone that's cursorily reading it, that the fact that the ICLA and the CCLA text in the Apache format refers to a project, and in our case, the project in this text is the JavaScript Foundation, not what we would consider a project in any other context. And it would be really great if that could just refer to the foundation, for instance. But I do understand that if there's a particular reason to not vary at all the base Apache text, then that might be sufficient reason not to do that change. Because without that, someone who's reading that on behalf of one project of the foundation is not easily going to realize that signing it will apply to all of the other projects of the foundation as well.
That's a really good point, Emily. Let me see if I can check on this right now, and see what it would take to update that. I know we certainly can do custom text in the tool. That's not really an issue. And the reason I don't want to say, yeah, let's go ahead and do this, I'd like to just double check it with legal and make sure we're not changing any meanings inadvertently. Or if we need any additional definitions or something like that, I'd like for them to weigh in on that. The feedback's good though, and well taken.
So let me ask, because we're almost done with our agenda and we'll be wrapping up soon. What should I first of all, should I put the label back on this particular issue, the updating to the
yes.
Okay. And maybe you can comment in there once you kind of go through it a little bit, Brian, and check some things to just give us an update on where that is. Great.
Sure.
Cool.
Can I just flag one thing on that issue? Brian created an easy way for you all to add a footer to your project. And I think we've noticed in doing an inventory of projects that during the merger and some of the bootstrapping that not all projects have adopted the OpenJS Foundation footer. So really encourage you all to check out your projects. And if you see others, flag for us, and we'll get that sorted out.
Okay. Thank you. Cool. All right. So moving on. The last issue and final issue, I guess that's the same thing, is responsible security disclosures, which I know Martin has PR open. I think the last thing is he was going to update with some comments. I'm assuming he hasn't had a chance to yet. Do you have any update, Michael?
I don't have any update, no, sorry.
Okay, no worries. This is the pull request that Martin has open. This is moving security reporting to stage 3. There's a few comments in there that Martin said that they would work on. So maybe we'll ping them in Slack and see if there's any movement here or what we should do to wrap this one up. Which I think relatedly, there was a Twitter question as well that Chris Hiller mentioned I think Rich Trott had brought up. So I don't know if it relates to this work as well. Anyway, all right, cool. So that's it for the agenda. Does anybody have anything else that they want to discuss? We've it's 37 minutes after, so we got a little bit of time.
I think it would be interesting at this point to talk a little bit about the time of this meeting, whether it makes sense to continue trying this or to do something else.
Yeah, that's a good point. In my thought about this, first of all, I feel a little guilty about this. I don't think it was promoted extensively, and maybe even like doing it a few times would in and of itself kind of spread some awareness.
The other thing I'll add is we have a good number of people here, so it didn't not work.
Bad. Yeah, agreed.
Personally, reaching out to folks in time zones that might be the way to go. We do have a pretty broad reach on Twitter, but if you missed it, or the Slack channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It seems to me like it wouldn't be bad to do this for a few sessions and then kind of judge if it's helpful or hurtful, or maybe we need to rethink the times overall. And if we did do that, I think alternating maybe with the 2 p.m. slot is good, but I'm open to whatever.
Didn't we also have one more time slot that we were going to try out? An alternative time? Remember we had 3, and out of that we said we were going to do 2 of them?
Well, we were doing the other 2, the noon and 2 p.m. Eastern time, sorry to be Eastern centric. But I think if we were to try the 9 a.m. time, again, Eastern, that's trying to rotate between the 3 might be too challenging. So maybe just my thought was the extreme, not extremes in a bad way, but like, early and afternoon for me might be the widest spread of time to get a wide variety of people able to join.
It would be good to also ask, like, is this easier for any of the people who did show up versus the other times as another data point?
It's easier for me than the earlier time we normally do. What is that?
12, I think.
9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern.
Yeah.
Just because that's such a popular meeting time when you have a team across the Atlantic, because it's one of the 2 hours that really works for everyone.
Yeah. Makes sense. What do you think, Robin? I saw you unmute.
I was going to say I'm kind of an early bird, but being respectful of any of our West Coasters. Shelley, anyone else? Who else is on the West Coast?
I am.
That's right. If your time zone is funny, you've got to, you don't.
I'm Arizona time. This time of year, we're the same.
Dylan was saying
an hour later.
Yeah. Dylan gets up at 4 a.m. though, so it doesn't count.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't mind. And if it, again, I'd like to make it easier for other folks as well. So
I wondered about, sorry, Robin, go ahead.
No, again, even with friends in Europe and India, and then maybe we can get some folks from APAC. That'd be cool.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how much of a difference it makes in those areas. But I wondered about even just 1 hour, 10 o'clock Eastern time might be a little bit easier for the West Coast folks, but might still be acceptable for time zones out that direction. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's sort of like China, it's 12 hours off. So it's now, it would start at 9 p.m. Which I can see being significantly better than 12 p.m.
Yeah.
Did we reach out to the folks who are in European and Asian time zones, or set GMT 0 and beyond? Did we reach out to those folks outside of the ones who would normally attend who are here still, and let them know, or are there no others?
I think Joe was implying that at the beginning that we may not have reached out as much as we possibly could have or should have for
Okay.
this.
Yeah, and
Gotcha.
frankly, I don't know if we have a list or an idea of who we would be reaching out to. But I think maybe for folks who would know, we would lean on them. Or I'm not sure how we would do it to best raise awareness and encourage involvement.
Let me put it this way. Would anyone here be opposed to us trying again, say in some few number of weeks, an early-ish hour like this for a meeting? Possibly, was it Joe that you recommended an hour later than the current start?
It was just an idea. I'm not good with time zones, so I don't know if it what the impact has. But I was primarily thinking about our West Coasters. I know it's quite early for engineers aren't known for getting up early, at least software engineers. So yeah, I don't know.
I think the silence can count as some level of consensus. So I would recommend that you post to that the issue about trying the different time. We'll start a new one about maybe for like 2-3 weeks from now, trying some other time again. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, would we just aim to do this in 2 weeks? Just try it again in 2 weeks? Is that the thought?
I would almost say, like, if we have consensus, just switch the earlier time to this time, see how it goes for a few iterations.
Yeah, that's what I feel too. I'm not hearing a lot from Tierney and Shelley, and that maybe because they're asleep. I don't know.
I'm awake.
Do you two have any thoughts? I mean, I call you out specifically because I saw the Twitter thread this morning, which I know was, I assume was in jest, but I thought I'd ask since you might have thoughts.
You have anything, Shelley?
Not to put you on the spot, I apologize.
I mean, I would say like this time is fine in the sense that like the time is rotating, right? So like in general, like I personally am actually like an early enough riser that this like definitely isn't as bad as I think it would be like for some other software engineers. Like, I normally get up at like 7:30 probably. But I would say like, do we know like how often this time would repeat?
Well, we were talking about doing it every other week for a few weeks to see if it folks in other time zones that we fear may not be participating because of the US centric meeting times.
Every other week, it might be a little bit of a struggle for me on the West Coast. I would do my best.
Yeah. And I've thought about like, a 3-week or 4-week rotation. I just don't want to add more complexity to people's schedules.
What about the 7 a.m.?
What's the question, Robin?
Opposed to, should we try 7 instead of 6 for West Coasters? How would that impact the rest of the folks?
That would be fine by me.
7 also totally fine by me. That's much closer to my normal wake up hour.
Yeah, that is normally around when I start working, so that works for me.
Well, maybe that's the suggestion. Maybe we move it an hour later, and and then try it every other week for a little bit.
I think one thing that we could do is if we do end up getting Asia from, or I'm tired. If we do end up getting interest from APAC, I think we can adjust then. It seems like we haven't had any engagement today, and I don't know if there has been interest. Not trying to exclude, but more trying to make sure that we're not necessarily like optimizing for something that we don't have. Like changing the thing and then hope, like kind of crossing our fingers that people will come is maybe the less optimal way to do it, rather than like when people ask or explicitly asking for feedback. and then optimizing toward that seems like a little bit of a better path there.
I don't disagree with you, Tierney, although I will add that my feeling is that if we had a more welcoming time for some period of time, then it would be more welcoming. I know it's sort of a tautology, but
No, I totally get that. And I mean, like, is this, I guess like another thing is, I think this also speaks somewhat to general like welcoming in the CBC stuff is like, are we open to literally anyone showing up? Is that how we are framing this? Because that hasn't necessarily been my understanding, and generally at least in the node stuff, that's not necessarily how.
Well, we have
committee meetings work.
observers, so anybody can join as an observer.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
anybody can join as a regular member if they're active in the projects. I think Joe's point is it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy if people look at things and say, I'm going to have to get up early every week, then they're not going to be interested in participating, or just can't because they've got personal commitments, right?
Yeah, no, I'm totally aware. I totally understand that. I guess like it is largely just like a thing of like, do we have members of projects who are in APAC? I know we have a couple people in Australia, and I know of like one or two. I can think of two people in like Asia, but that's the extent of the people. And the ones I've talked to have, like, the ones I know of there have zero interest in participating in this. So I could be wrong, but like, yeah, I guess that's just what I'm getting at is like, are we optimizing for something that we're not gonna see happen?
Yeah.
Just as an observation, the current optimization has definitely not really been for APAC at all.
Yep.
It has been for the benefit of Europe, where the meeting times that we previously had were clearly very much evening meeting times. It works for me personally because this falls in with all of the other meeting times I've got with Americans. And the way that I'm not doing this really as a part directly of my daily work, but a little bit on the side. So it kind of works for me. But for many of you that are participating in this from the US or Canada, you are participating in this as a part of your actual work day in one way or another. And the dynamic there is, shall we say, a lot more common. And this dynamic is not really possible with the previous meeting times that we've had for European participants who are forced into participating in this outside of their normal work hours.
Yeah.
So if we do continue this for a couple of iterations with, well, I'm at 10 hours ahead of California. So I'm on the extreme case of this, but certainly an hour later from this would much more easily enable participation from Central or Western Europe, for instance, near the end of their work days, but not like clearly after the end of their work days, as we've had up until now, at least.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're not necessarily trying to optimize for APAC in this specific time zone, then I think moving it back an hour is fine. If our stated goal there is European friendliness, I'm fine with that, and I think that's a fine optimization to make there.
So just curious, what time then would be a good Asia APAC friendly time, do we think? Not that I'm suggesting we throw in another time, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud, I guess.
Generally, afternoon Pacific time works because it's like 13 to 15 hours, 12 to 15 hours ahead of Pacific time. So
like 7, 8, 9 p.m. Eastern, Joe.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
Which then is impossible for Europe.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And I wonder, that's an idea just popped in my head. I mean, what if we just had an open issue too, where we could have folks register their interest, but you know, state that the time is the meeting time is a challenge for them. I don't know if that's really would be effective in any way, but I wonder if there would be a way to have people register their interest.
Maybe potentially doing the same kind of spreadsheet that we do in Node and having that be openly editable, and that can be your interest of like here is what I want to do, and here's or like I am interested in participating. Here's the times I can participate, because then that would help us and like include time zone. So then that would help us kind of optimize in that way and like make sure we can hit as many time zones if we do try to do something different like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good idea.
So I think we have two different questions here. One is, do we do something like what Joe proposed, and starting from 1 or 3 weeks from now, for a couple of weeks, make that meeting an hour earlier from its normal time, which is an hour later compared to today's, if I remember right.
I think it would be
however,
2 hours earlier than normal.
Yeah,
would be
2 hours.
An hour later would be, this was 3 hours earlier than normal.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
And then that's one decision that we could make. And then another one is that we open up an issue in order to get feedback via GitHub comments or entries on a spreadsheet somewhere about potential interest from people who are interested in participating, but who are unable to do so given our current times that we're operating in. I think we can do either or both or neither if we so feel like.
I think just doing both is fine.
I think so too.
Not too hard to do.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Cool.
So who's going to actually do the things? Who's going to open up those two issues?
I will work on the one that is, you know, doing an hour later than this time and rotating it. You know, so in 2 weeks we would do this again, but an hour later. And if somebody wants to pick up the other one, that would be great.
Oh wait, do you mean in 2 weeks or in 1 or 3 weeks? Because I think in 1 week we have the normally earlier one. This is the normally later one, right? That we're on.
Oh, it is, isn't it? It is, yeah. Isn't it? Interesting. My thinking was that doing the early and one would be good, but that would mean next week we would do another early session, or would we just wait till 3 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever the heck? My brain.
Your call. You make up the issue and then we'll agree on it.
Yeah, just make the issue. Well, we can figure it out then. I don't know if we need to keep necessarily digging into this.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good.
Tierney, do you want to put in the other issue?
I can.
Or would you rather I do it?
So I would normally say yes. I have a lot of things that I'm trying to knock out this week. If you're fine waiting a week, I could do it. But if you want to get it done, I would recommend someone else taking it.
Well, I'll take it on because I opened this Pandora's box.
Cool.
And I'll ask for people to enter preferences as GitHub comments then.
And then Tierney, maybe, or Michael, or someone who knows where the spreadsheet is for Node as like an example, could share that.
I just put a link in the chat.
Great.
Zoom. I can also send it to people.
Great. I'll save it and maybe share it in Slack too. Cool. All right. Well, that's great. I appreciate everyone taking a few minutes to talk about that stuff. So we have a plan on that, and we can take the comments and conversation to the issues and go from there. So cool. And we're, just about out of time. So I guess now's a good time to call it a wrap. Thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate it.
Talk to everybody later. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone. Bye.
Hello. Can someone stay? I am new here. I just wanted to understand how can I contribute.
Sure, I can talk with you for a minute if other folks want to drop or stay as you like.
Hi, welcome. I
Okay.
have to run, otherwise I would stay. So I have another.
Okay. No worries, no worries.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
yeah,
Joe?
welcome.
Yeah, me too.
Cool.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So you know, maybe tell me about yourself and I guess I'll tell you about me first. You know, my name's Giuseppe. I'm the chairperson of the Cross Project Council's the Cross Project Council, which is the kind of top level technical and advisory committee at the OpenJS Foundation, where we have a number of open source projects. Maybe you're familiar if you're here in the meeting. What is it? Tell me about yourself and what you're interested in doing, and maybe I can be helpful.
Yeah, so myself Gautam, I'm from India, and I'm working on Node.js. I'm developing application on top of Node.js for like 4 years now, and I'm aware about some of the projects, some of the OpenJS related projects.